In 2024, we have seen the impossible rise of Indiana football. In year one under head coach Curt Cignetti, the Hoosiers are currently at 10-0 for the first time in school history, have a real chance at going to the college football playoff, and have a quarterback who is flying up draft boards. Not only has he had a spectacular season in Indiana, he may have a future on Sunday. And his story is pretty much impossible. You've probably heard of his brother Nathan Rourke, who ended up becoming a superstar at Ohio and spent some time in the NFL. But many did not know anything about Curtis Rourke, his younger brother. After growing up in Canada, he had pretty much no attention coming out of high school and managed to get to Ohio because of his brother. While he was at Ohio, he ended up becoming a star over his 4 years there and is now transferred to Indiana and become one of the better quarterbacks in college football. Today, I'm going to tell you the insane story of Curtis Rourke, how he went from a 2-star recruit to an NFL draft prospect, and how he turned around Indiana football in his 1 year there. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about the insane rise of Curtis Rourke. So in order to understand how Curtis got to this point, we first need to go back in time. Before he was ever a Big Ten household name or on the list for the Heisman Trophy, he grew up in one of those rare Canadian households that preferred pigskin over ice. For Curtis, his time in the sport began when he was just 4 years old, as initially it was in large part because of his brother Nathan. Curtis wanted to do anything that his older brother did growing up, saying, quote, "It was at the time when my brother wanted to play, and at that time in my age, I just wanted to do whatever he did." Because of that, Rourke got into football because of Nathan, and although Curtis tried every sport, including basketball, hockey, and badminton, football was the one sport that caught his eye as a young athlete. The two brothers would throw the football around while their dog ran around in their yard in the city of Oakville, Ontario. But as a younger brother, Curtis was always in Nathan's shadow. He said, quote, "As I grew up, I started to play every sport, and I really fell in love with football, and I felt I had a certain gift or talent in it, and I just wanted to work hard and perfect it." Eventually, Nathan would blossom into one of the best quarterbacks in the country of Canada, and they were dreaming of one day playing college football, but the problem was they were in Canada, a no man's land for college recruiters. He had gained pretty much no interest from US schools, so his parents rolled the dice. They moved the family nearly 1,000 miles away to Alabama, hopeful that the football world would discover their children. College coaches rarely leave the US to scout and recruit players, so Canadian prospects seeking scholarships usually have to go to the US. Betting on their son's future, they moved to that town of Elmore, Alabama, and they went to Edgewood Academy. Because of this, Curtis would have to sacrifice his spot on the high school JV team in order to help his older brother get college offers. Nathan said, quote, "He was so frustrated with the situation being away from home and having a whole year where I was the star. Him and I butted heads a lot, and we fought a lot in those couple of years, especially trying to get him to go to the gym. I remember throwing on the field and getting into arguments because I wanted to work a little bit longer, and he didn't." Meanwhile, Curtis's patience did eventually pay off, as Nathan's success helped his foot get in the door in terms of recruiting. If not for Nathan, Curtis may have been a quarterback lost out in the Canadian wilderness. He played grade 13 football in Oakville, where the Canadian rules typically repel college coaches from scouting quarterbacks there, and Curt began to realize he had a special arm during that time, and he continued to use it during his prep career while he was at Holy Trinity High School. From there, the quarterback began to blossom, and after a strong season during his 12th grade year, he took advantage of Canada's opportunity to play an extra high school season, and it ultimately helped him begin receiving college looks. He said, quote, "I took that and was able to get an offer. Without Canada offering that extra year, I really wouldn't be here, and it's just awesome how things have worked out." Curtis had other offers in Canada in 12th grade, but didn't get MAC level attention until he played that extra year, as Ohio and Buffalo were the two schools that really wanted him. He was rated as a 3-star recruit, the #1 player in Canada, and at one point a top 100 quarterback in the 24/7 Sports rankings. Curtis said, quote, "I kind of lucked out. I hit a growth spurt late, so I didn't really know what my future would look like in high school, but having my foot in the door with Ohio and other MAC teams because of my brother really benefited me on that first notice." Ohio's quarterback's coach remembers him attending a camp while his brother Nathan was on the team, and he kept his eye on the 5'10" high school junior. He was smaller than most of the other quarterbacks, but a few months later, he noticed that he had a growth spurt as he had tacked on a few more inches and muscle, and now he's able to launch the football down the field with ease. According to 24/7 Sports, Curtis was the number 84 pro-style quarterback and the 2,221st best player in the class of 2019. So, how'd he end up doing at Ohio? Well, let's take a look. So when Curtis arrived in Athens, Ohio in 2019, he would see action in just one contest and would end up redshirting. However, it was a very valuable year for Curtis, and also very special because he was able to suit up alongside his brother. He said, quote, "It was almost like a dream come true. Coming in as a freshman with nobody from your high school at all, And just being able to know someone like your brother to help show you the ropes, and not even with just football, but how to deal with college and life, was very valuable. The Rourke brothers achieved their first goal of playing together on the same college team, as they were also roommates, and Nathan had just led the Bobcats to their third straight bowl game, and Curtis took notes, offering advice to his older brother from the sidelines on game days. Curtis would then spend the next 2 seasons splitting time with the transfer, and correcting tons of professors who accidentally called him Nathan all the time. Nathan said, quote, "Curtis was just trying to find his own place. What was difficult for him was he was always trying to make a name for himself. He was really trying to get out from underneath my shadow, and he ended up doing that." In 2020, Rourke would pass for 386 yards and 3 touchdowns, and then in 2021, he would throw for 1,800 yards and 11 touchdowns. His first 3 years were pretty non-eventful, but then he would take over for 2 seasons as a starter for the Bobcats. In 2022, Curtis had his best year, throwing for 3,256 yards with 25 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions. He was nicknamed the Maple Missile, and he led Ohio to their first 10-win season since 2011, their first MAC championship game appearance since 2016, and their first bowl game since his brother back in 2019. Sadly, he would end up tearing his ACL late in the season, but he became the first Bobcat to win the Vern Smith Leadership Award as the MAC's most valuable player. So, he faced another obstacle. He said his goal was to heal and rehabilitate his knee in time for the season opener in 2023. He did just that, but sadly was injured in the first quarter of the Bobcats' first game. Luckily, he would return for the remainder of the season, but he ended up falling apart a little bit. He ended up throwing for only 2,200 yards with 11 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, so all of a sudden Curtis Rourke was now back under the radar once again. He entered the transfer portal on December 5th of 2023, and immediately he got calls from BYU, Vanderbilt, and Wake Forest. But when newly hired Indiana head coach Curt Cignetti saw his game film, he immediately called him and knew he had to sign him. 2 days later, as Cignetti packed his boxes to go from Virginia to Indiana, he called Rourke to offer him a scholarship. The coach reeled off his different accolades, his coaching resume, and talked about his stint coaching for Nick Saban at Alabama. Rourke said, quote, "I really thought highly of him after that, but being told what his winning percentage is, I had to fact check him, and everything was true." The Hoosiers had finished dead last in the Big Ten with a 3-9 record in 2023. Tom Allen was fired, and they were now left without a quarterback after Brendan Sorsby had transferred over to Cincinnati. Coach Sig in the offseason said, quote, "He knows how to play quarterback. It was very evident to me. Tom Brady knew how to play quarterback, and Phillip Rivers, who I coached, also knew how to play quarterback, and I see a little bit of Phillip and Curtis." Rourke transferred to Indiana and no one really cared, and he joined a program that had gone 7-17 over the past 2 years. His teammates said, quote, "We have all these guys who might not have been the star player in high school, but we make sure that we all become the star player in the end. All of us have chips on our shoulder, and we're willing to go the extra mile that all these other guys are not willing to do." So how has Rourke done in 2024? Well, he's had a tremendous season. In their first game against Florida International, he'd throw for 180 yards and a touchdown. Against Western Illinois, he'd also combine for nearly 300 yards and 3 scores in that one. But those 2 games were kind of irrelevant. In week 3, he would travel on the road to the Rose Bowl against UCLA, and this is where Rourke showed us his magic. He ended up completing 25 passes for 307 yards and 4 touchdowns, had no interceptions, and led them to a 42-point road victory. This is when people knew Indiana was different, as that is something that IU never does. He then returned back home and put up 2 touchdowns against Charlotte, and then was hit with a little bit of a roadblock against Maryland. After 2 early interceptions, Rourke would eventually bounce back, throwing for 359 yards and 3 touchdowns, and they would beat Maryland 42-28. All of a sudden, Indiana was 5-0, and Rourke was slowly getting attention as he was extremely efficient and was putting up really solid numbers. After that, he'd go on the road and help them beat Northwestern, and in that game, he threw for 380 yards and 3 touchdowns, and all of a sudden, he was getting a ridiculous amount of hype. They now had a huge game against Nebraska, who many thought could knock off the Hoosiers, but Rourke ended up scoring an early touchdown before he had a setback as he ended up injuring his hand. This would rule him out for the remainder of the game, and Taven Jackson would have to start in his place. Jackson would beat Washington, and Indiana would continue to be undefeated, and then he would make his return against Michigan State. After going down 10-0, Rourke fired up 47 straight points, throwing for 263 yards and a season-high 4 touchdowns in a huge victory over Michigan State. This past weekend, Michigan came to town, and while the Wolverines have not had their typical year, this game proved to be a big challenge for the Hoosiers. The team completely stalled in the second half, including Rourke, but luckily, his 2 touchdowns and 200 yards were enough to overcome a bad interception he had in the second half, and Indiana was now 10-0 for the first time in school history. So far this year, Rourke has thrown for 2,400 yards with 21 touchdowns and 4 picks. He has a QBR of 88.6, and that is currently second in the country. He's considered a top 10 draft prospect, a dark horse Heisman contender, should be a first-team All-Big Ten selection, and really should have a chance to play in the NFL to some level. Nobody would have ever saw this though. He really only got into Ohio because of his brother. He played at a MAC school, was one of the least publicized transfers in the portal this year, and played for a school that was not supposed to do anything. Rourke is still going under the radar nationally, but if he can beat Ohio State in 10 days and help them get to the playoff, everyone will remember Rourke, and he'll be probably considered the best quarterback in Indiana football history. For now though, we'll just have to wait and see, but what do you guys think? If you're an Indiana or Ohio fan, what do you think of Curtis Rourke? Do you guys think he has a chance of going off to the NFL? And what other big-time player should I spotlight next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out one of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.